Shalom, everyone. We're in chapter 22 of Genesis. I'm sorry, we're in chapter 21 of Genesis. The last 2 weeks, we spent some time talking about things that I struggled with a lot as a young believer. We talked about things that I read in Scripture that didn't make a lot of sense to me, and when I was in the mainline churches, we would get to in the contextual study, we'd get to that point, and the preachers would either gloss over a few chapters in difficult chapters in Genesis, or would completely disacknowledge them and just jump over and start later on in the text. And I think a lot of it was because they didn't want to deal with some of the topics that are brought out here. Chapter 21 is no different. It says, Yehovah took note of Sarah as he had promised, and Yehovah did for Sarah as he had spoken. Now, several chapters ago, before we got into the Sodom and Gomorrah story, before we got into the descendants of Lot and all of that, way before that, or right before that, I guess say right before Sodom and Gomorrah came into play, Mashiach, pre-incarnate form, two angels with him, they come to Abraham and they tell him, next year at this time, I'm going to come back and visit you, and your wife is going to conceive a child. And she laughed within herself because she couldn't believe that at her age, at her elderly age, where she was past the time of bearing, that she would finally have a child for Abraham. So she laughed, and the angel, or actually I believe it was Mashiach, said, why did your wife laugh? And Sarah now said, I didn't laugh. Be careful what you say. That's one lesson here. Be careful what you say to Elohim, or to his representative, when you speak to Mashiach, when you ask for things. Be careful what you say, because those words will come back to you. Now, Scripture says that the word of Yehovah will not return void. Okay? There's multiple meanings to that. People want to take it and say, if you teach the word, people will get saved. That's not what it means. Not really. It can mean that. If you preach enough, somebody's going to hear the word. The word of Yehovah is Mashiach. And when we speak to Yehovah through that mediator, that word does not return void. But be careful, because that word that you speak via Mashiach to our Creator, be careful, because when it returns not void, it may be full of things that you didn't predict, that you didn't know were coming. You may ask for something and get it, and 10 other things that you didn't want. Be careful. Be very, very careful. But it's interesting here, and the book of Genesis does this several times, where we read and it goes off on one tangent, and we read like we read about Lot and his descendants and everything that happened, and now here we are again 1 year after the visitation by Mashiach and the angels. So we have to roll back in time a little bit and see what now is happening in the camp of Abraham, because we've been following Lot for the last few weeks. Sarah conceived and bore a son to Abraham in his old age at the set time of which Elohim had spoken. Abraham gave his newborn son, whom Sarah had borne him, the name of Yitzhak. And Yitzhak means Who knows? It means laughter or laughing. Okay? Because he remembered, whether he remembered or not, that Sarah had laughed within herself. He was laughing for joy. Can you imagine being that old of a man and finding out you're going to be a father? And then you become a father. And you've spent your entire life praying for a son, and you have a son to be your heir so that your manservant doesn't become your heir. Of course he was laughing. He was laughing hysterically. They say that my grandfather's grandfather on my father's side had 21 children by 4 wives. He'd marry one, she'd have 5 or 6 kids, she'd die, he'd marry another, she'd have 5 or 6 kids, she'd die. Only the last one outlived him. And they say he was, I believe they say he was in his late 70s when he found out he was going to be a father for the last time. That's not as old as Abraham. But can you imagine how that old man must have just chuckled and said, "Oh, what have I done? What have I done?" And yet I'm sure he laughed for joy. And when his son Yitzhak was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him as Elohim had commanded him. Now Abraham was 100 years old when his son Yitzhak was born to him. Sarah said, "Elohim has brought me laughter. Everyone who hears will laugh with me." The Hebrew there, I think, actually says laugh for me. It's from a footnote, and I went back and looked at it, and I think the footnote is actually more correct than the translation here. And she added, "Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would suckle children? Yet I have borne a son in his old age." Think about the double miracle there. Not only was it a miracle that a man 100 years old can conceive a child, Sarah, our understanding is she was about a year younger than him. Think about the impossibilities in the eyes of men. The child grew up and was weaned. This is another fast forward. And Abraham held a great feast on the day that Yitzhak was weaned. Now, some people read that and say, "Oh, see, it's kind of like a birthday party. Why don't you celebrate birthdays?" That's not what it says. It doesn't say he celebrated his birth. It says he celebrated a milestone in his life. He celebrated that his son was beginning to develop and come of age and was weaned to the point that now he doesn't need mom every second of the day. He's going to be daddy's boy. Sarah saw the son whom Hagar, the Mitzrayim, had borne to Abraham playing. She said to Abraham, "Cast out that slave woman and her son, for the son of that slave shall not share in the inheritance with my son Yitzhak." Who decides inheritance? Biblically speaking, who decides inheritance? Abba. Okay? And there are guidelines in Scripture. There are guidelines in Scripture about how that inheritance is supposed to be determined. This was not Sarah's place to even have a comment. Not saying that Abraham could not have asked her opinion, but that's not how this happened. That child that Hagar bore to Abraham was still Abraham's child. The matter distressed Abraham greatly, for it concerned a son of his. He got it. He got it. Took him 100 years, but Abraham is finally figuring out what it is to do things righteously. But Elohim said to Abraham, do not be distressed over the boy or your slave. Whatever Sarah tells you, do as she says, for it is through Yitzhak that offspring shall be continued for you. The Hebrew there actually says, shall be called for you. In other words, it's through him that your name will be carried on. I didn't understand this for a long time because I thought, why would Elohim tell him, put your son away, listen to your wife? I'll tell you why. It took me a lot of study on the scripture. It took me a lot of study in different written midrash forms, different rabbim, asking a lot of questions. And finally, I think I came several years ago to an understanding here. Elohim is about to give Sarah what she wants. And it's not going to be what she thought it was. As for the son of the slave woman, catch this, I will make a nation of him too, for he is your seed. You see, Sarah can talk Abraham into not giving a physical inheritance of land or wealth to Ishmael. And Abraham can go along with that. But you know what Sarah can't get Abraham to do because it's not possible? She can't get Abraham to say, he's not part of my covenant. She can't get him to say, and even if he said it, it wouldn't be true. She can't get him to say, that is not my seed. That seed will not be blessed. See, when she was talking about inheritance, she was talking about who's going to be the next warlord of the land. Who's going to be the next guy who owns all the sheep and the cattle between this river and that river? Who's going to be the next guy that the people come to as a chief to mitigate things for them? That's what she was looking at. But she missed the most important thing. The thing he could not have stripped from him is that he was a son of Abraham. You know, in this life, we get a lot of things taken from us. We'll talk a little bit about that in the next teaching, but we get things taken from us all the time. We feel like we get used and abused. People don't appreciate us. Yaakov and I were talking about he's getting ready to leave his job where everything has been so blessed by his hands, by his work. He's getting ready to leave and go into a different line of work. And he can already see that as he's preparing to leave, the blessing that has fallen on that place is getting ready to be taken away because he has been their Yusuf in their Mitzrayim. And so I shared with him two instances, and there are more, but I shared with him last night 2 instances wherein the same thing was done for me. I walked into a place, it was struggling. When I left, it was flourishing, but soon after I left, everything fell apart again. Not because I'm great, not because I'm some fantastic, person in any way, but because they had a son of Abraham, because they had a son of Yitzhak, because they had a son of Yaakov working there who they entrusted to handle certain things, and whatever was entrusted to him to be handled was blessed by the Elohim of Abraham. Early next morning, Abraham took some bread and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar. He placed them over her shoulder together with the child and sent her away. And she about in the wilderness of Beersheba. Remember that, Beersheba. When the water was gone from the skin, she left the child under one of the bushes and went and sat down at a distance, a bow shot away. Remember that, a bow shot. For she thought, let me not look on as the child dies. And sitting thus afar, she burst into tears. Anyone who's never been a parent can't really understand what's going on here. As a parent, you should have a natural, inborn, undeniable desire to provide for and protect your children. Even my wife, when she took Yaakov, who is not her biological son, as her son, has loved him so much and cared for him so much over the years that I think if you told him to this day that that was not his mom, he would fight you. A year ago, this week, we brought a child home from the hospital who is not our child. Biologically, she's Lisa's great niece. But she needed a forever home. She needed parents. In the deal, she got 4 siblings. And I hope everyone here knows that if it came down to it, that daughter is as much our daughter as any of the children sitting in this room are our children. That given the choice, the hard choice to decide if we ever had to, we're in a situation similar to this and we had to decide which one of these children lives. It couldn't be simply because this one's biological and this one's not. So put yourself in Hagar's shoes. Hagar, we go back a few chapters, and she was the only righteous person in the chapter. She was the only person doing the right thing. And now, here's her reward, it seems. She did what her mistress, her over her said. She did what her master said. She loved the child that was born to her. She was the only righteously behaving person in that whole text. And here she is. She believes about to watch the child die and can't bear to see it. Elohim heard the cry of the boy. Do you hear? Who did he hear? He didn't hear Hagar. Doesn't really mean that he didn't, but it doesn't say that he heard Hagar. And I'm sure she was crying out. He heard the son of Abraham. Think about that. You know, people get so wrapped up in the conflict between the Arab peoples and the Israelite people. Okay? And they say, this is our inheritance. And you know what? Yes, the land is ours. It's supposed to be ours. But the blessing is for all of them. That's why if you fly over the Middle East and you look down and you see all the Arab countries and their vast wealth and all their oil, and you see this little dot that is the sons of Isaac, sons of Yitzhak. Sarah chose the type of inheritance that her son would get because she was more concerned with physical things than spiritual things. Elohim heard the cry of the boy, and an angel of Elohim called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What troubles you, Hagar?" Knew her by first name. "Fear not, for Elohim has heeded the cry of" who? The boy, the son of Abraham, where he is. "Come, lift up the boy and hold him by the hand, for I will make a great nation of him." Then Elohim opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. Remember that well? She went and filled the skin with water and let the boy drink. Elohim was with the boy, and he grew up. We're fast forwarding. He dwelt in the wilderness and became what? A bowman. How far away did she sit? A bow shot. Coincidence? I don't think so. He lived in the wilderness of Paran. That's going to come up in a few chapters. The wilderness of Paran. Pay attention for that one. And his mother got a wife for him from the land of Mizraim. Why? Because she was from the land of Mizraim. Okay? Because he was no longer under the direct influence of his father. So his mother, who had grown up in the pagan ways of Mizraim, did what she thought was best and got him a wife from Mizraim. Not a wife from the camp of Abraham. Imagine the difference that the world would be in, the different world we would live in today if she had gotten him a wife from the camp of Abraham. If she had taken her son back to the camp or sent someone to the camp to get a wife for him from among the righteous people of Elohim. At that time, and this is going to throw people off. This threw me off at first. At that time, Abimelech and Phicol, we haven't heard about Abimelech for a chapter or two now. There's a break in the text of the Torah. If you read it in the actual Torah scroll, there's a break right here in the text. At that time, it's not referred to at the time that his mother got him a wife from the land of Mizraim. Okay, we're reversing here. We're rolling back to at the time where we left Abraham, because that's really what this is the story of. It's the family of Abraham. At that time, Abimelech and Phicol, chief of his troops, said to Abraham, "Elohim is with you in everything that you do." And that is going to be a theme throughout the rest of this book, throughout the rest of Scripture, and throughout our lives if we pay close attention. "Therefore, swear to me here by Elohim." In other words, we see where your blessings come from, and we know you don't want to lose those blessings. So swear to us by the source of those blessings. You see, they didn't quite understand. Remember how we read in previous chapters about he behaved unrighteously, but he got blessed in certain ways anyway? Why? Not for his sake, but for Elohim's sake? For the sake of the name of Yehovah? They said, "Swear by him that you will not deal falsely with me or with my kith and kin, but will deal with me and with the land in which you have sojourned as loyally as I have dealt with you." Oh boy, did he do that when his great-great-grandchildren, by so many greats, walk back into the land. And Abraham said, I swear it. You see, what they didn't understand is that if he broke that promise, there were going to be ramifications, yes. But the sons of Abraham were going to own that land. You know what had to happen to Abimelech and Phicol and their people in the time that Abraham was out of the land? They got kicked out of the land. You see, it was going to be Abraham's descendants' land. It was going to belong to us no matter what. Somebody was going to have to leave. And since he said, you know what, I'm not going to deal falsely with you. I won't come against you. I won't drive you out of this land. And he didn't. But while his descendants were down in Mitzrayim a few generations later, guess what happened? They got driven out of the land. Then Abraham reproached Abimelech for the well of water which the servants of Abimelech had seized. Remember the well of water we were just talking about? I'm going to tell you, and as we read, you'll understand why. That's the well that Hagar found. Why did Abraham send Hagar in that direction? I'll tell you, because there was a well there that belonged to the sons of Abraham. But Abimelech said, I do not know who did this. You did not tell me, nor have I heard of it until today. Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them to Abimelech, and the two of them made a pact. Now, why did he do that? I'll tell you why he did that. By Torah, and I'm not saying Abimelech followed Torah, but we're in Torah, so we're discussing Torah. By Torah law, if Abimelech had ordered his people to seize that well from Abraham's people, then Abimelech would have owed Abraham payment. But Abraham made an accusation that was false. And when he found out that it was false, he did the righteous thing, and he said, I'm going to correct this. I'm going to pay you this so that you are giving me back what I thought you stole, but somebody else stole it. But it's in your area now, so you're going to give it back to me. And he made this deal not even knowing that down the road he was going to have another son and send his first son into the wilderness, praying that he not die. But I bet you he remembered this deal when he did. Abraham then set 7 ewes of the flock by themselves. And Abimelech said to Abraham, what mean these 7 ewes which you have set apart? Set apart, sanctified, made holy. That's what that means. He replied, you are to accept these 7 ewes from me as proof that I dug this well. Okay? So not only did he purchase back the possession by making right on the accusation, now he's saying, if you take these ewes, this stands forever. It cannot be contested. This doesn't belong to your descendants. It belongs to my descendants. Hence, that place was called Beersheba. You see that? We have rolled back to find out why the place that Hagar was sent to with Ishmael, why was it called Beersheba? Why? Why is that important that she was in the wilderness of Beersheba? Why was she sent there? Because he made a pact in which they named the area Beersheba, because that belonged to Abraham. And he's saying, I can't give him this promised land, this Ishmael, this promised land, but I can give him what Abimelech has agreed is mine. For there the two of them swore an oath. When they had concluded the pact at Beersheba, Abimelech and Phicol, chief of his troops, departed and returned to the land of the Philistines. Abraham planted a tamarisk tree at Beersheba and invoked there the name of Yehovah, the everlasting Elohim. You see that? He marked the place with the name of his creator. He made that place holy and sanctified, not knowing that someday it would be the refuge for his son. Be careful what you say in the name of Yehovah. And then stand back and watch what happens when you've said it. And Abraham resided in the land of the Philistines a long time. Do we have a midrash? No? Jordan?
I think it's true that what you said is a lot. That he was the son of Abraham, and even though he wasn't the son of promise, he was the son of the Abraham covenant just as much as Isaac. And people today, especially, it seems like a lot of Gentiles are so, they think that all Arabs are evil and everything, and even Jewish people and Arabs are just all horrible and evil. And well, I just because there are some that are evil, but there's some in every people that's evil, and it doesn't make them.
And here's the thing:
if there's anybody that we should be trying to witness to, trying to
be the other sons of Abraham.
Be the other sons of Abraham.
So
there are people in them.
Right.
What I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. People say the Arabs are evil because they're descended from Ishmael. Show me anything in here that Ishmael did wrong. Show me anything that Hagar did wrong. Nothing.
I think it's actually I think isn't it in the New King James it says somewhere that he mocked?
No, I'm talking at this point where he was cast out.
No, I'm saying I think this is the same chapter, and I think this is it's a totally different translation.
Oh, okay. I would have to go back and look at that.
Because they actually, I don't remember if it's this chapter, but oh yeah, it says verse 9. I think it is. It says Sarah, Saul the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, had born him Abraham plain.
You think it says that? You think
I
that
think
word says
I think it says mocking in this one.
Scoff?
Scoff.
Okay, so it is the same chapter. I didn't catch that. That's a good catch. I mean, that's
So it's,
I'll have to go back and do a word study on that and see exactly what it says.
So it's, they try to make people try to make it out, and probably since that time, before they try to make it out that,
That he was the bad son.
He was a bad son, that's why he sent him away. Well, it wasn't, he didn't even want to send him away. He was just doing what Sarah wanted.
Abraham.
She wanted him to marry Hagar in the first place. Now she's sending him away. It's just crazy.
But Abraham, and you see through this, Sarah got everything she wanted. And it turned out to not be what she thought it would be every step of the way. And Abraham deeply, and I believe fiercely, loved Ishmael. Okay? It was his child. I mean, it says in Scripture he was distressed over this because it was his son. Okay? And that goes back to be careful what you want and what you ask for. Anybody else? All right.